Cross-channel does not shy away from showing the worst of humanity, with even, or really most often, the protagonist doing absolutely horrendous things at points that feel unjustifiable. This isn't a story of heroes or villains, just people. But what makes it all tolerable is the level of maturity with which it's handled in two ways. First, Romeo has a very acute sense for what is and isn't necessary to be shown. All of the scenes of assault, for instance, don't actually show it happening. They cut off just before or at impact, and instead rely on prose, story context, and synergy of the artwork to make the wounds clear. These scenes are still haunting and challenging to read, absolutely, but unlike a lot of edoge that handles topics, the part of the writing it's triggering is not a blunt betrayal, but rather the existence of it at all. Secondly, CC has quite possibly the most human portrayal of mental illness and trauma that I think I've ever seen in a visual novel, and certainly still one of the best I've seen in fiction. Almost everyone in this game is neurodivergent in some way. It's practically baked into the narrative of how it's set in the skull for people the government deems as at least partially non-human. Gunjo Academy is not a place of learning. There's a scant few references and self-deprecating jokes in a narrative about it being more akin to a jail, a placement to keep the outside world safe from the people inside and them hidden from others. And that feels far more true to its purpose than any educational place. It is a depressing, empty academy, one that wears knowledge as a mask. It's an excellent stand-in metaphor for a whole load of places in society that unwanted people are often offloaded into with no recourse to heal. Jail, as just mentioned before, is the obvious metaphor, but I've had friends in correctional facilities speak of similar experiences. And as someone who was homeschooled poorly from when I first had memory to around 6 or 7, and subsequently educationally neglected, the carelessness about the issues students face feels eerily relatable. But as it pertains to the students of the academy in this story, they're all portrayed as very much human despite their struggles, many of which aren't even apparent until late in the story. I think maybe the most pressing example I can give is the presence of someone who has an antisocial personality disorder, and they aren't treated as some sort of monster or irredeemable mess. They're still a human of emotions that, like the rest of the cast, struggles to communicate with others and understand their own feelings. It takes a lot of maturity to be willing to paint people society sees as nothing but liars and heartless beings as actual humans, and that same level of maturity is given to everyone as well. Characters with severe anxiety about the world, emotional dependency, toxic bonds formed over trauma, everyone is treated fairly, but their actions are never excused, and the pains they cause are never easily forgiven. And crucially, it all means something. Cross-Channel is a very deliberately written game with a grand, winding web of relations, developments, and histories that serve the grander narrative about the challenges involved in simply being human and all that entails, all impacting the themes of the story. On a more minor level, it deals with the ways in which humans can be thoughtless beings. It deals heavily with the impulses that make us who we are, impulses that hurt others, and impulses that make us lovable. It's also about the loneliness of existence and the ways in which we try to escape from it. And as mentioned prior, it's about learning to see everyone as human, regardless of the thoughts they have or the actions they choose to take. That doesn't mean granting unconditional forgiveness, because even characters in the story can't always do that. But at the very least, it means learning not to revoke humanity and basic dignity from others, even in the worst of times. But on a more grand level, it's about the challenges innate to human communication. You never know if something is going to be communicated with someone in the way you intend, doubly so if you're someone who has trouble expressing themselves because of any number of things.